Christ has risen. Christ has risen indeed. Alleluia. Happy Easter, everyone. This is the best day of our Christian year. Jesus lives. The resurrection has happened. We have seen the sunrise. It's all over. The darkness, the pain, the death of Good Friday, the long waiting through the vigil on Saturday, it's all done. We're on the other side now, and we can celebrate. And, eat that chocolate. Enjoy the day. This is definitely the time to celebrate. And as we look at the scriptures this morning, we're going back into the Gospel of Mark. Now, for a great deal of Lent and for all of Holy Week, we've looked at the story of the last week of Jesus in the book of John. John, of course, is, Jesus knows who he is. He's very strong. He's very powerful. There's no real questions about what he's about, who his followers are, what's going to happen. There's power there. Well, now we're going back to Mark, and it's kind of like scriptural whiplash because we're going back to a gospel that has Jesus in secret. People don't know who the followers are. People are very, very nervous about talking what's what. They have no idea what's happening. We have the people hiding. They have no idea how this is going to play out. And we get the story of Easter morning. The women have watched Joseph of Arimathea put Jesus in the tomb. Easter is the time when the women actually get a chance to be highlighted. They watch, and the next morning, well, actually not the next morning, they've got to go through the Sabbath first. But once the sun rises on the third day, and third counted the way it was 2,000 years ago, not third the way we'd count it today, the women go to the tomb. And we read it's Mary Magdalene, who is always there. This time we also include Mary, the mother of James, and Salome. We have no idea who these other two women are. Mary Magdalene has a long history in the church of being an incredibly powerful figure. In fact, Origen, one of the earliest church fathers, talked about a woman with the base name Mary, Mariamma, I think it is, that influenced greatly the development of Christianity. And every scholar who has worked on this agrees that he's talking about Mary Magdalene. So she's there with two other women, and they're debating how are they going to roll away this big stone? Because that's what Joseph of Arimathea and the soldiers made sure. They wanted to have the stone there. The reason the stone was there, of course, is for the very reason that Easter is celebrated. That Pilate, Caiaphas, the soldiers, everybody wanted to make sure, especially the temple leadership, wanted to make sure no one stole the body of Jesus and then created this grand myth that he rose. And guess what? Stones rolled away. And myth? Anyway, the story's developed. The women know. They were there. They were told by this young man who was sitting in the tomb waiting for them. Then why are you looking for Jesus here? He's not among the dead. He's risen. He's gone on before you to Galilee. He's waiting for you. And so we go back to the beginning. Now remember, this is Mark. Mark is very fast, very moving, always on the go, not a whole lot of commentary, just keep the pace. So we have them now going back into that world where Jesus first started his ministry in the beginning of the gospel, where it starts with this is the good news. This is the story of what happened to Jesus and why we now know that Jesus is alive and leading us where we need to be, has shown us how we're supposed to behave. And the women are terrified. Now, I really encourage you to pull out whatever version of the Gospel of Mark you have and take a look at it, because at the very end of chapter 16, there are 4 endings. Some Bibles will only have 3, a lot of them will have 4. And you'll notice that the 3rd and the 4th ending have a lot in common with the Gospel of Luke. And the 2nd ending, that's that old snake handler stuff that no scholar actually knows what it's talking about, where it came from, who wrote it. It's a complete mystery to historians and biblical scholars, completely. And then we have the original ending. The first 8 verses that we're looking at today is the original ending, meaning it's part of the oldest manuscripts we have. All the other endings have been added through time. But we have, at the very end of chapter 8, the end, as far as we know it, of the earliest versions of the Gospel of Mark. And we have these women being absolutely terrified and running away. Of course they did. They came to do the job that they were supposed to do. Joseph of Arimathea might have put Jesus in the grave, and maybe he bound him a little bit, but that was the job of women, to make sure that the body was ready for burial. Because burial, as I mentioned in the Easter Vigil yesterday, burial was about it was the first part of the process where the body was put in to essentially rot, so that the bones would be collected, and then the second burial, the permanent burial, will happen after that. When Jesus brought Lazarus back from the grave, Lazarus was still in that first state of burial. That's why he was covered with all of those robes or cloths. So that was the state that they expected to find Jesus in. And on the way they remembered, oh my heavens, the stone, right, what are we going to do about that? And they debated about how that was going to be dealt with. And then they arrive at the empty tomb, where, quite frankly, the worst nightmare of the temple leadership and probably Pilate and a bunch of other people has happened. Jesus is not there. There have been many stories, actually, over the years of people who have wanted to disregard and discredit the belief in resurrection, saying that Jesus' body was just moved somewhere else, that it was just stolen while everybody else was at Shabbat and no one was paying attention. If that's the case, then why was the young man there on the inside to tell these women what they needed to do, give them the message, pass it on, tell the people what's what? There's something incredible about Mark's ending of this gospel. The fact that we do not belabor it, that they're told to go back to Galilee, go back to the beginning, go and start it all over again, only this time no more, no better, do better. And the women, being so scared, they run away. Now, remember, these women are under the same threat as all the rest of Jesus' followers. If the temple leadership can get together with the political leadership that is there supervising the Passover, there's nothing to say that the rest of them can't be crucified or killed in some other manner too. To be part of this, to go out at that time, just even do what the women were there to do, was an act of incredible bravery. We cannot blame them for running away and suggest that they are too scared to do what they need to do, because they showed up. Showing up is a large part of how we celebrate this Easter. Showing up for what Jesus taught us to do. Showing up for our friends and family who don't really understand what Easter is all about. Friends who may just see this as a long weekend, or yeah, that's something you do, or whatever, that's like junior to Christmas kind of thing, when it's not. It's the biggest holiday of our year, the biggest holy day, because something incredible happened. The bravery of those women 2,000 years ago is the bravery we have to have. And it's okay if we want to run away and hide for a bit, because we know they didn't hide forever. And they possibly went back to Galilee, or they possibly stayed and told others to go back to Galilee. The reason we can know all of this, is because the story got out. They did not hide the story. And according to Mark, there was no one else coming behind them who were actually going to show them this. Now remember, this is also Mark the play. Mark is not just a rapid movement. It's also this style of Greek play where we, as the audience, are Act 3. Jesus' first ministry was Act 2. His movement towards Jerusalem and his ultimate death was Act 3. His ministry was Act 1. Going Holy Week and going to Jerusalem was Act 2. Now we're in Act 3, that the women have set off for us. We, as observers, as listeners, as the audience, are now expected in this genre of play that Mark is, to now carry the message forth. Easter Sunday is a fantastic time to kind of rejig ourselves, to put ourselves back into focus of what we need to do. If we've spent the last 6 weeks of Lent really doing a deep dive, really kind of looking at that thing that we needed to work on this year, not all of our things, but this year's thing that we have to work on, then we're at a new place with it right now. We're at a new place with our faith, and we're starting a new journey in many ways. What do we do now with the message of an amazing resurrection? What do we do with the message that death isn't the end? It's not the worst thing that can happen. I was watching this interview with Queen Latifah, who's a favorite of mine, and she was talking with Drew Barrymore and said that one of the best pieces of in wisdom she'd ever been given was a partner and friend of hers saying, it's not that big a deal. No matter what happens, it's not that big a deal. Put everything in perspective. That's what Easter morning kind of invites us to be part of. The death of Jesus, while significant, was not that big a deal because resurrection happened. No matter what we're struggling with is not that big a deal because something more can come of it. Our faith, as we looked inwardly over the past 6-7 weeks, can now move outward again. What we struggle with now is not that big a deal. We can move forward with the knowledge that Jesus has risen, that we are born anew with him, that there is nothing that stands in our way of sharing this message, however we want to do that, with words, with actions, simply with prayer. We are now responsible for carrying that on. And it's also our turn to go with the disciples back to the beginning in Galilee, take another look at everything Jesus taught us, learn better this time, understand better this time, and go forth. We have to share the message that Jesus has risen. Alleluia. Jesus has risen indeed.